By the time we just start up, there will be some topics that we will be just going through. We have already covered a bit, but still we'll detail it for you. So let's begin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. For the lecture session today, we shall be going with pulmonary ventilation. We going with the overview of respiratory system, and in the overview, what we happen to look at is uh, the respiratory system is basically meant to function for the supply of oxygen and removal of carbon dioxide, and this is done by something called as respiration. Actually, it is a majmua of 4 steps. As a medical graduate, you should understand that by respiration we mean to say about ventilation, about external respiration, about transport of gases, and about internal respiration. So we will understand one by one. The step number one is about ventilation, and it just means movement of air into and out of lung. Right here, as you can see, we have drawn an alveoli. Okay, instead of a lung has got millions of alveoli, and the air from the atmospheric air, this is the atmosphere outside. The atmospheric air gets into the lung, as you can see from the diagram, lung into the atmosphere. So the atmospheric air that is coming into the lung is rich in oxygen, and the alveolar air that is going out of lung is rich in carbon dioxide. That is how oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged, are brought into the lung. So the first thing is about bringing the air into the lung, and that is about ventilation. After that, the external respiration happens here. And what is that external respiration? Gases exchange between the blood, lung alveoli, and the blood. Okay, this part. This is our external respiration. After that, what will happen is the blood that is coming from the tissues right here is rich in carbon dioxide. So this carbon dioxide get exchanged and less in oxygen. So the blood gets receives oxygen, exchange of oxygen happens, and the blood is loaded with oxygen and offloaded of carbon dioxide. I repeat, what is the purpose of bringing blood, all the blood to the lung, passing it through the lung? We want to pass the blood through the lung so that oxygen is loaded and carbon dioxide is offloaded. And that is exactly happens at this level, at the level of exchange. And this is also known as external respiration. But than that, the oxygen is موجود in the blood and is carried in the circulation, and finally it reaches the tissue level right here. Once it reaches the tissue level, that the transport of gases happen. That is the third step. Right here you can see. After that, it is at the tissue level, the cellular respiration is happening. The cells are also needing oxygen to do the metabolic process, and in turn they are producing carbon dioxide that has to be exchanged again with the blood. So the blood that is coming rich in oxygen offloads the oxygen and give it to the tissues, and from the tissues it takes up kathir amount of carbon dioxide that the tissue has made, and now the blood becomes rich in carbon dioxide and less in oxygen. So this blood is deoxygenated. Deoxygenated. Keep on mentioning this side, deoxygenated. Whereas the blood that was coming right here, this side, it was about this whole of the stomach oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood. Okay, that is the idea. After having said this, what we happen to look for is, once we are done with this, the after passing through the tissues, the blood get deoxygenated, and lazim if the blood get deoxygenated, it has to go to the lungs again to get oxygenated. Okay, that means it has to pass near the alveoli where exchange of gases will happen. Carbon dioxide will be offloaded and oxygen will be loaded in the blood. So by respiration, we mean to say all these processes. That is the idea you should have. Having said this, so okay, so just we remove this. So these are the basic 4 steps that you should be knowing about. That is what is important right here. Having said this, then we move to the other part, that is what are the functions of respiratory system. We will talk about the functions. For the functions, it filters, warms up, and add water to the air. It moistens up the air. Sometimes in hot weather season, the air that we are breathing outside is not having any water vapor. It has to be added. Exchange of oxygen, yes, that is one of the very important functions of respiratory system. Exchange of carbon dioxide is also one of the very important functions of respiratory system. Regulating the pH, how pH is regulated by the lung. Any idea?
By removal of carbon dioxide.
By removal of carbon dioxide, the first thing that you should note about pH is, everybody has to note it in Arabic or English, that carbon dioxide is a acidic or a basic gas.
Basic.
Carbon dioxide is,
Acidic.
yes, acidic. Carbon dioxide is acidic. That's why if you add water to carbon dioxide, water, it forms H2CO3. If you add carbon dioxide with water, it forms an acid, H2CO3. So if I can remove the acid, how can I remove the acid? By removing the carbon dioxide. So if I'm removing the carbon dioxide, I'm removing the acid from the body. That is how acid base balance or pH is maintained. Also, respiratory system is very important for vocalization because the air that moves out vibrates the vocal cord and we can talk, we can produce sound. If no air passes through the vocal cord, if vocal cord doesn't vibrate, we cannot make sound. And also respiratory system protects the alveoli. As we know, gas exchange happens in the alveoli, so it also protects the alveoli itself. It starts from the nose and then it passes to the nasal cavity, pharynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and finally to the alveoli level. We know that whole of the respiratory tract is divided into conducting zone and respiratory zone. By the ism conducting zone, we mean to say just the air is being conducted, no exchange. Whereas in the respiratory zone, the air is being conducted and also there is an exchange. Exchange of gases happens in the respiratory zone. As we move down from the trachea down to the bronchus, then to the bronchi, then bronchioles, then alveoli. So from where do the respiratory zone starts? Respiratory zone starts from bronchiole, min bronchiole. Anybody? Respiratory
Respiratory,
zone,
respiratory
respi-
bronchioles.
respiratory bronchiole. Simple. Respiratory zone starts from respiratory bronchiole. So any structure, Baden respiratory bronchiole, all of them will exchange the gases. Okay, bronchioles. That is the idea that you should have. Having said this, this is a nice diagram showing us the respiratory bronchioles. This is our terminal bronchiole, and you see, Baden the terminal bronchiole is the respiratory bronchiole. You see the terminal bronchiole, this one, and you see the respiratory bronchiole, this one. It is Baden. And Baden, this respiratory bronchiole, you have lot many structures like alveolar duct, alveoli, alveolar sac. All these will these exchange gases, alveolar sac, alveoli.
Yes, they will.
Yes, they will. Okay. Having said this, there is a membrane called as a respiratory membrane. Basically, it is made up of endo. This is the blood side, just for your interest. This is our blood side, and this is our air side, that is the alveoli. Exchange happens right here of the gases. So this respiratory membrane is made up of capillary endothelial layer, the basement membrane, and the uh, epithelial layer of the alveoli. All the three together form the respiratory membrane. Also, alveoli are thin-walled sacs made up of simple squamous epithelium consisting of two major cells. One is the type 1 alveolar cell and one is the type 2 alveolar cell. Type 2 alveolar cell is lot in interest because it makes a very specific chemical that is called as surfactant. And surfactant is the one that does not allows the alveoli to collapse. This is a nice alveoli. If surfactant माफी मौजूद, the alveoli will collapse. If surfactant is not there, then alveoli will collapse. If surfactant मौजूद, the alveoli does not collapse. And this surfactant is produced by type 2. Some macrophages, the immune cell, they keep on taking up, eating up the dust particle. That's why they're sometimes called as dust cells. Exchange surface of alveoli are cobbed webbed. Cobbed web means this is an alveoli, and over that you see a network of capillaries. This is kind of a web, a spider web or cobweb. These are the pulmonary capillaries who are making web-like structure sticking to the alveoli, and the blood flows through these capillaries and get nicely exchanged with the alveoli. Only hurdle between the exchange is the respiratory membrane. Okay, respiratory membrane. In lung diseases, there are diseases in the lung. Say, for instance, if in the basement membrane area here some water fills up, will the exchange be good or bad?
Be very bad.
Of course, but
Of course, bad. This is a condition in medical science called as pulmonary edema. In pulmonary edema, the exchange will be a problem. Okay, people who are smoking, they the problem will be about the cells, the simple squamous epithelial cells of the alveoli, they can be damaged. Once they are damaged, the alveoli may detach, it may not be very near to the capillaries. So the passage of the air, exchange of the air will be a problem. So these are the two clinical aspects in which we should know that the exchange can be a problem if something goes wrong with the respiratory membrane. And further, we will study these diseases in medicine, okay? Especially the pulmonary edema, the one that I have marked here now. Having said this, what are the muscles of respiration? We are going to start with ventilation first. I want the Jadid air to come into the lung and the lung alveoli. So there are muscles. The lung is mojud in the thoracic cage, okay, and there are muscles that are moving this thoracic cage. So the muscle of inhalation, the main muscle of inhalation is external intercostal, diaphragm, serratus anterior, pectoralis major. Which one? The main muscle
diaphragm.
for respiration.
I think
The
diaphragm.
main
Diaphragm.
muscle for diaphragm is the best answer. The main muscle for inhalation is diaphragm. Are there other muscles that help? Yes, external intercostal. Are there other muscles that help? Yes, once we are under stress, like playing a football, do we breathe fast and deep while playing soccer or while running? Yes, we breathe fast and deep. So we want more muscle power. In those cases, we use our sternocleidomastoid, the scalenes, the pectoralis minor for inhalation. Otherwise, at rest, everyday job, lectures, exams, we are just using our diaphragm and external intercostal, mainly the diaphragm. Having said this, what about exhalation? Which are the muscles required for exhalation normally in a normal nuffer? I mean, so he's not doing any exercise or stress or running. Which is the muscle required for exhalation? Anybody?
Internal costal.
Lung is like a balloon filled with air. So, balloon filled with air. I put air in this balloon. Will I need some force to put air into this balloon?
Yes.
Yes. Now I want to take out air from this balloon. Will I need force to take out the air from balloon if the balloon mouth is open?
No.
No, it'll just deflate.
No, it will just deflate. That's the reason why in normal exhalation, you do not need any normal exhalation, you do not need any muscle contraction. While playing or running or playing soccer, even exhalation has to be fast That is the time I need my muscle even for exhalation because I want to do it quickly. That is the time I will need my internal intercostals, thoracic, transversus thoracic, and maybe abdominal muscles like rectus abdominis. Only in situation of stress and in situation where exhalation has to be quick and faster, okay, then only I will be needing muscle power. Otherwise, inhalation is active or passive process, needs energy, does not needs energy. Inhalation
Needs energy.
needs energy because you need energy to contract the diaphragm, so it is an active process. Inhalation, you need force to bring air into the balloon. Whereas if he has a exhalation, if I have to take out air from the balloon, all I have to do is just release this and the air will go automatically out. So exhalation is a active process or a passive process?
Passive process.
Passive process. It
Process.
does not need energy. It is passive. I hope so. Just my cursor mouse, I cannot write down everything. I hope so everybody is noting down, because these are basic concepts, these are basic revision things, these are basic things that you should focus while reading from your Ganong and Guyton, whichever book you are following. So exhalation is a passive process. That's the reason why normal exhalation does not needs any muscle. Do we need muscle for labored exhalation? Yes, I need muscle for labored exhalation, and that is internal intercostal, transversus thoracis, and abdominal muscles. Having said this, coming to dynamics of normal breathing cycle. The Boyle's law states that for a given quantity of gas in a chamber, the pressure is inversely proportional to volume. That is, pressure is inversely proportional to. That means if this is a balloon, you keep on filling air into it. Correct? You keep on filling air into it. Since this balloon is elastic, it will keep on growing bigger and bigger. So, what if you don't allow the balloon to grow bigger? Say, for instance, this one. I don't allow the balloon to grow in size now, and I keep on filling the air. What will happen? The volume is constant. Okay.
Yes, I think.
The volume is constant. So what will happen to the pressure here?
Increase.
Will increase.
The pressure will increase. The pressure will increase. Okay. That's why pressure and volume are inversely proportional. Whenever we increase the pressure, okay, whenever the volume is less, the pressure will increase. Whenever the volume is more, like if you expand this, you keep the same amount of air now. You're not going to fill up air. Now, say for instance, 1000 milli of air, 1000 milli of air. Think it this way, 1000 milli of air. You put it in a closed volume, 1000 milli. The pressure will be more, okay, because volume is not increasing. You have made volume less. The second option is you put in this one, 1000 milli of air. You have made the volume kabir. You have increased the volume. Okay. Option number B, you have increased the volume. What will happen to the pressure?
reduce,
Will decrease.
Will decrease. So this is an idea about relation between pressure and volume. Okay. For a fixed amount of gas, you don't keep on filling. For a fixed amount of gas, pressure and volume behaves this way, inversely proportional. Whenever the volume will increase, pressure will decrease. Whenever the volume will decrease, pressure will increase. Having said this, dynamics of normal breathing, the outer air is at an atmospheric pressure of 760 millimeters of mercury, and there is some pressure in the alveoli. Think alveoli as a balloon. So some pressure is موجود in the alveoli. Okay. Also this alveoli, and there is a chest wall. In between there is one extra membrane called as the, anybody? The one that I'm showing it in red.
Below.
What is this membrane? The pleura. The pleura. Pleura is sticking to the chest wall, tightly sticking to the chest wall. Okay. There is a small gap or a cavity in the pleura. There is a small gap or cavity in the pleura. And it is filled with, this is known as pleural cavity. And this pleural cavity is filled with, any idea? Air or
Pleural fluid.
pleural fluid. Little amount of pleural fluid. Very little amount of pleural fluid. So this pleural membrane are, good doctors know that this pleural membrane are two. This pleural membrane is actually this way. Just see to my diagram. How many layers of pleural membrane?
Two.
Two.
Parietal and
One is,
visceral.
very good. The visceral is sticking to the chest. Which one is sticking to the chest wall? The visceral or the parietal?
The visceral.
The
Right.
visceral.
The visceral.
And which one is sticking to the alveoli?
Oh, sorry, the visceral.
This.
The visceral. Okay, don't make these mistakes. So actually, just for understanding the physiology, you can go with, there are two layers of pleural membrane. In between, there is a gap called as pleural cavity. Okay, and it is a closed cavity in which there is a pleural fluid, and the pressure inside the pleural cavity is always negative. Is always negative. So one of the layers is sticking to the chest wall, one of the layers is sticking to the alveoli. What will happen if somebody comes, or with all the effort, if somebody starts pulling the chest wall outside?
The
Will it
pressure.
pull? Will it pull this layer, the outer layer of the pleural membrane? The layer, this layer, will it pull this layer
yes,
of the pleural membrane? Yes. And since the pressure is negative, so also this layer of pleural membrane will also get pulled. And since this layer of pleural membrane is very much attached to the alveoli, so after some time, this alveoli will get bigger and bigger. This alveoli will get pulled up. This alveoli will get pulled up. Okay, in all directions. This alveoli gets pulled up in all directions. And once that is a situation, Okay, we don't have that diagram here. So once that is a situation, what will happen? Say for instance, there should be a pressure difference for air to flow. Air will flow from high pressure to low pressure.
Low pressure.
What what do you think? This alveoli, okay? There was shoya air hina, and no air was flowing because the pressure hina and hina are same. Atmospheric pressure and pressure in the alveoli are same. Now what I have done is I have pulled the chest wall. By pulling the chest wall, there is a pleural membrane attached to the sticking to the chest wall. That pleural membrane gets pulled. There is a negative pressure in the pleural cavity, and because of that negative pressure, the inner pleural membrane gets pulled. The inner pleural membrane is very much attached to the alveoli, so the alveoli gets pulled. Now, the alveoli that you are thinking of is has grown in
Pull.
size. Has grown in size.
Expanding.
Yeah, now it has expanded. What will happen to the pressure hina if the alveoli has expanded? Shall I draw it? Okay, now the alveoli has become this large. What happens to the pressure?
Decrease.
Decrease.
Decrease. The pressure has decreased. Now we have a situation where we have decreased pressure hina in the alveoli and kind of increased pressure outside. So what will happen? Air will get in or air will go out?
Will
And
remain the same.
we'll get in.
If the pressure has decreased in the alveoli as compared to outside pressure, the air will
Come in.
get in, come in. Because we know air always flows from high pressure to low pressure. So whenever the pressure in the alveoli will go down, there is a pressure difference, so the air will get in. Okay. This is how the air gets in by movement of chest wall. What do we do during breathing? We expand our chest wall. Once you expand your chest wall, this is exactly what happens. Now, these have been labeled various terms like intrapulmonary or alveolar pressure is nothing but the pressure inside the alveoli. That's what they are talking. Intrapleural pressure is the pressure in the pleural cavity, and it is always negative, always 4 millimeters of mercury less than the pressure in the alveoli, and it is always negative. And the difference between the alveolar pressure and the intrapleural pressure is called as something called as transpulmonary pressure. Having said this, whenever there is a neural input to the diaphragm gets pulled downwards, inspiratory muscles become active, the muscle contracts, the chest wall expands. Whenever the chest wall will expand, something is attached to the chest wall. A layer of pleural cavity is attached to the chest wall. Will the pleural cavity be pulled? Yes, pleural
Yeah.
cavity will be pulled. Due
Yes.
to the pull on the pleural cavity, okay, pull on the pleural cavity, there will be pull inside the pleural cavity. So what will happen to the intrapleural pressure? It will become more negative. Once this becomes more negative, it will pull the alveoli outside because there is another layer of pleural membrane sticking to the alveoli. So the alveoli will get pulled up. If alveoli gets pulled up, it will increase in the volume. If the volume increases, the pressure decreases. We have read in one of the laws. If the volume increases, pressure decreases. So pressure in the alveoli goes down. And that is a situation in which the air will get in. That is a situation. Transpulmonary pressure increases, lung volume increases, and then this is exactly what happens, that the alveolar pressure goes down. Okay. If the alveolar pressure goes down, there will be flow of air into the alveoli. Do not get bothered about so many terms and terminologies. Keep it simple as I show you right here. Whenever this layer of pleural membrane gets pulled. This layer is attached to what? Anybody?
Chest wall.
Chest wall. If the chest wall will move because of the muscle contraction, and the layer attached to the chest wall will pull this layer outside. Once this happens, what happens to the pressure inside?
Decrease.
Decrease. Once this decreases, this will cause the inner layer to be pulled out. And once this happens, what will happen to the volume of the alveoli? What will happen to the volume of the alveoli?
Increase.
Increase.
Increase. And if volume increases,
Pressure decrease.
pressure will decrease as compared to outside. And once the pressure has decreased as compared to outside, some amount of air will get in, and a time will come when the pressure will again be same after air getting in. This is how. But the nice thing is, some jadid air got into the alveoli. Some jadid air got, because of this pressure change that you do, some jadid air gets into the alveoli. And this is how the alveoli air is brought in. Having said this, the same thing has been drawn in the diagram. Having said that, this is exactly what is happening in during the inspiration and expiration. Okay. Say for instance, the alveolar pressure and the atmospheric pressure. This is a chart of alveolar pressure and the atmospheric pressure. Just watch this. Alveolar pressure in relative to atmospheric pressure. Okay. Like comparing two of the stuff. The alveolar pressure and atmospheric pressure are same. If they are same, what is the difference between them? They are same. So I would consider alveolar pressure to be 0. Once the alveolar pressure becomes lower than the atmospheric pressure, maybe by -1, alveolar pressure becomes -1. If alveolar pressure becomes negative, that means the pressure is going down. So what will happen? Air will get into the alveoli or air will go out of alveoli?
Get in.
Get in. So right here in the diagram, you see wherever it is negative, the air is getting in. Air is getting in. As the air is getting in and in and in, a time will come when the pressure will again be same inside and outside. True or false?
True.
And that is the reason once again the alveolar pressure becomes 0. Mafi difference between alveolar pressure and atmospheric pressure outside. Now, due to, say for instance, the alveoli start shrinking, what will happen to the pressure inside? Will it increase or decrease in the alveoli?
Increase.
Increase. And as the pressure increases, what we happen to see is that the air will move out. That is when the alveolar pressure is positive. Alveolar pressure is high. So the air will move from high pressure to low pressure. Over here, alveolar pressure is high, so air will move out. Again, air will keep on moving out and out and out, and a time will come again the alveolar pressure and atmospheric pressure will be same, and the difference between both of them will be, there will be no difference, and that is when the alveolar pressure is taken as 0. So this is how change in the alveolar pressure can bring air in, and change in the alveolar pressure can take air out. Whenever alveolar pressure becomes negative, the air gets in, as here. Whenever alveolar pressure becomes positive, the air goes out, like here. This is what this diagram is showing. Having said this, lung pressures are the atmospheric pressures, the intrapulmonary, the intrapleural, all these pressures we have talked about, not much into this. Changes during breathing, the previous diagram is a better diagram. Alveolar pressure is changing, becoming from zero, it becomes negative, then again it becomes zero, then from zero again it becomes positive, and from positive again it becomes zero. Okay. And this brings the air in and out of lung. What happens to the lung volume? The lung volume changes from zero to maximum, maybe 500 mils. And from 500 mils, again, it comes to this 500 mils comes to zero. So the same stuff has been talked about, special care being taken for alveolar pressure that we have explained. Having said this, atelectasis and pneumothorax are the applied aspects. Say, for instance, the intrapleural pressure is always negative, and that prevents the lung from collapsing. Collapse of lung is known as atelectasis. Okay. Collapse of lung is called atelectasis. Say, for instance, somebody is hit by a knife and it has hit the pleural cavity. So now pleural cavity is in direct connection with the atmosphere. So pleural cavity was having a negative pressure or a positive pressure?
Negative.
Negative. But as it has been punctured, will the air move into the pleural cavity or air will move out of pleural cavity?
Two per
Out.
Into.
Into pleural cavity. And that is not a good news, because once the air moves into the pleural cavity, the lung that was attached to the pleural membrane won't be sticking around, and the lung will collapse. The lung will collapse because it was the negative pressure that was keeping the lung sticking to the pleural cavity. It was the negative pressure that was keeping the lung sticking to the pleural cavity. The moment the pressure in the pleural cavity becomes positive, the lung separates out, and that's the relevance of having a negative intrapleural pressure. Having said this, we go for lung volumes. What a lung volume is. Since time immemorial, people wanted, since we are studying respiratory system, people wanted, is there any method to know who is having the best respiratory system in the kingdom? That's how people used to think in old ages. So what they used to do, they used to ask a nafar, okay, okay, I draw a nafar here, and this is his nose and mouth, and okay. I ask a nafar, I light a matchstick at a distance from his nose at maybe 15 centimeters. I light a matchstick and ask the nafar to blow it out. The nafar does it. Then I light another matchstick at a larger distance, maybe 30 centimeter, and I ask the nafar to blow it out. And he does it again. And I ask third matchstick at 45 centimeters, and he blows it out. So he has got so he has got a nice blowing power. That's how people used to measure. This was a matchstick test that people used to do. People who could not blow it out at 45, say for instance, I did it maximum up till 30. So who is having a better respiratory system? This myself or this Mr. Alex?
Alex.
Mr. Alex.
Alex, Mr. Alex. The problem, the mushkila with this method was that it was not standardized. It could not be used as a research. It cannot be used as a standard method. Okay. It is just a comparison. So that's when people thought of making more standardized instrument, and that is when the people thought of making the spirometer. Okay, and this is one of the model of a spirometer. The spirometer actually measures various lung volume. Spirometer measures changes in the lung volume during breathing. It will give you more standard results. So having said this, what are the lung volumes we should be knowing? During a normal breathing, a nuffer breathes in and breathes out approximately 500 milli of air, and this is known as has a tidal volume. This is known as something called as tidal volume. 500 in and 500 out. Don't calculate it as 1000. We are just talking about how much air we take in. That is the air we breathe out. So it is saying during normal quiet breathing, about 500 milli of air moves in and out. Okay, 500 gets in and then 500 goes out. 500 gets in and then 500 goes out. Okay, that is known as the tidal volume. So tidal volume is 500 approximately. Also the amount of air that can be inspired, like everybody is breathing in this while taking this lecture, breathing out the tidal volume, how much it is? 500 mil. If I ask you to, you are breathing normally, but then normal inspiration, can you breathe something extra? With effort, can you breathe
Yes.
something extra?
Yes.
Yes. And that extra is called as inspiratory reserve volume. This is for first time and the last time. This is Baden tidal volume. That is the thing that you should be knowing. It is Baden the tidal volume, the amount of air the nuffer can take in with all his effort. Baden the tidal volume is called as inspiratory reserve volume. Similarly, the nuffer was breathing in and breathing out normally. I asked the nuffer, can you put some effort and breathe out something extra Baden the tidal volume? Can you breathe out? Can you do it for yourself? Can you breathe out something extra, everybody?
Yes.
You can breathe out extra. That extra is called as expiratory reserve volume. Expiratory reserve volume. Okay. Who holds the Guinness Book of World Record for breathing out all the air mojood in his lung outside? Any idea? Who is the person who has done this? He has blown out all the air from his lung. Who has done this?
The one with
Is it
Atlantis.
is it possible to breathe out kullu air from your lung outside? Just you can try to put all the force and try to breathe out everything that is mojood in your lung. Can
No,
you?
it's possible.
Impossible.
No, no,
Not
it's possible.
possible. Not possible. Okay, not possible. You cannot collapse your lung. If you do that, the picture will be this way. If somebody does that, his lung will be this way. Can we do this? No. The problem with this is that it would take a lot of effort to expand the lung. So nobody can do that normally. That means baden all the effort air maujud in our lung. Is that true? Baden all the effort to breathe out all the air from the lung. Still some air is fi maujud in the lung. Correct? That air you cannot breathe out, and that is called as has a residual volume. Having coming to the capacities are simple to say, and it is just combination of lung volume. Like has a inspiratory capacity, you have to combine lung volume. So tidal volume plus IRV, inspiratory reserve volume, will give a capacity. Lazim, whenever the ism capacity is mawjood, try to figure out that the difference between capacity and volume is that capacity is jama of volume. Whenever I talk of inspiratory capacity, it is jama of volume. 2 volume or 3 volume or 4 volume, it could be any. Like inspiratory capacity, jama of 2 volume, tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume. Functional residual capacity is jama of expiratory reserve volume and residual volume. Vital capacity is jama of 3 volumes, has a tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, and expiratory reserve volume. Total lung capacity is jama of 4 volumes, vital capacity and residual volume. So vital capacity was jama of 3 volume. Bring all the 3 volumes here. So total lung capacity is jama of 4 volumes. So actually you have to remember this. And this is a nice diagram showing you all the details about what is what. As you see, the Nafar is breathing normally and we are tracing the spirometer graph. So breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Okay. From here we start, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. Now I ask the Nafar, breathe in extra. So he will take up till hina and then then he will take something extra. Then breathe out extra. Then normally breathe in, breathe out again. This way we get volume like Haza tidal volume. This one is inspiratory reserve volume. This one is expiratory reserve volume. And this is the residual volume. This volume is still mawjood, but then all the forceful expiration. You cannot breathe out this air. Okay. Since we told capacity is jama of volumes. For instance, inspiratory capacity is jama of inspiratory reserve volume and has a tidal volume. So you see the line. Functional residual capacity is jama of expiratory reserve volume and residual volume. So you can compare it. Vital capacity is jama of 4 volumes. Expiratory reserve volume, the tidal volume, and inspiratory reserve volume, 3 volumes. Total lung capacity is jama of 4 volume, the 3 top and also the residual volume. You can see right here. So these are the various volumes that we should be knowing. Which are the volume we cannot measure with the spirometer? Lazim, for measuring with the spirometer, you have to put that air into the spirometer. Which air you cannot put? Can you put your residual volume into the spirometer? Can you blow out your residual volume?
No.
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 No. So any volume that is having the residual volume, will not, you cannot measure with the spirometer. Like residual volume itself, functional residual capacity has got residual volume, you cannot measure it. Total lung capacity also has a residual volume, you cannot measure it. So that is an idea. What about pulmonary function test? Pulmonary function tests are basically tests to measure the ventilation. And basically, it looks for how much volume is blown out of lung by the nuffer. Like if how much air is blown out by the nuffer in the first second is called as FEV1, and kullu air that is blown out by the nuffer is called as FVC, or force expiratory volume. And we see for the ratio the air blown out in Wahid second and the kullu air blown out. We see the ratio and it should be around 80% for a normal nuffer. If something goes wrong with this, it is less than 80%, then definitely the person can be having some lung disease. And we will study about that. Lung diseases can be obstructive or restrictive. Okay. So pulmonary function test basically tests for the force vital capacity and force expiratory volume. Okay. So with this, we end up right here. Just go through this. This is a very important topic and also an interesting one. Yeah, you will once you read it from books. And for questions, we will catch up in the next session. Any doubts or queries? And this lung volumes and capacities is really interesting because it has got a lot of clinical significance in the hospitals. You will be doing lot many tests, all these in people. Like we know so many our grannies, nannies with asthma, with some respiratory problems. So we should have a very good idea about these volumes and capacities. Okay. So with
Yes,
this we
Jazakumullah khair.
okay, with this we close